everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is MsNoBuntu, DIVA, divinely inspired, privately anointed. We are on season 8, episode 3 of the Iyanla Fix My Life show. I don't have a whole lot to say before I get into the episode, except for first go watch the episode yourself and then come on over here and we can hash it out and talk about our insights and our thoughts and our light bulbs that we had while watching the episode. I will go back to the episode for reference just to contextualize whatever I'm saying and sharing my thoughts, but I suggest that you first go watch the episode yourself. And if you want to see my thoughts about this particular family, which is what is this, the Giles family, I will put videos from last season 7 up here as I go along the video in the first 5 minutes of the video. Also go into the description box and check for the chapters / timestamps if you want a quick navigation through the video. I will break these up into about 15-20 minute videos and then post them up in different parts so that they're not too long and you can watch them as a series over days. So after meeting with the entire family as the introduction, the segment, you know, Iyanla then meets with the queen mother, Dorothy, the grandmother, and they go back to the last thing that was said at the end of the second part of season 7 when they came. And she asks, you know, she goes back to, so why did you say you didn't like Jadyn, the youngest daughter? And you know, Dorothy says, oh, she has a mind of her own. And it's as if the mother is the daughter and the daughter is the mother. And says, Jamilla, Marc Snr's wife, her daughter-in-law, talked to her daughter about her. So the mother talks to the daughter about the grandmother. And she says that when she met Jamilla, Marc brought her over, and then next thing they were just married. Iyanla probes a little further into this whole, but why is that a problem that they got married? Okay, that's what happened, but it's 18 years now, but it's still coming up as if it's something brand new, like it happened yesterday. And this whole relationship that was inappropriate, where this young child is being made the man of the house, comes up, and Iyanla brings her to that awareness of, are you aware that you were treating Marc Snr as your surrogate husband? He wasn't your son to you. He was like a husband. He was like your man. And so it was as if you are fighting for his attention and you competing with his wife. When the wife came into the picture, the reason you don't like her, are you aware, is because it's as if this man was taken away from you, or abandoned you to be married to his wife. And it's interesting because you did the very same thing. You abandoned him to be with your husband. He couldn't even come live with you in Washington, D.C. When he got married. So that very same abandonment pattern kind of worked itself out, but it doesn't originate from Marc Snr. It originates from Dorothy. And so Dorothy has to kind of think about this kind of thing of hearing that story of how this abandonment that Marc Snr felt when he was younger, and how she can then make it better now and be willing to hear that and not respond and not react, but just take it in and then be open to, okay, what can I do about it now to make amends? And this was interesting in the sense of just those dynamics not being mixed up in those, you know, parent-child relationships and crossed over. Because now when somebody else, whether it's for the parent a man or a woman, and for the child when they grow up, a man or woman to marry them, it becomes this competition where people are competing for the other's attention and competing to prove that they're the main man in this son's life. I mean, they're the main woman in this son's life, and you know, and it creates this strange dynamic where people are vying for position, but they're a parent and there's parent, and then there's child, and then there's the child is getting married to someone else, and the child is not married to you. So you don't compete with the person that they're marrying, but you find a way to welcome them. You find a way to lean into, okay, there's a new person coming into the family, instead of pushing them out so they don't take your position. That's your child, not your spouse. After meeting with Dorothy, Iyanla meets with Marc Jr., the eldest son of the siblings. So meets with Marc Jr., but Marc Jr. is not there physically, so they're speaking over, iPad, over Zoom, Skype, whatever. And so Marc Jr. gets to tell his story. What I didn't like? They kept on saying little Marc, and I'm like, he's 31. Stop calling him little Marc. He might have been little Marc at some point, but stop calling him little Marc now, because even that's a thing. That's a thing that needs to be dealt with. Like, he's not little anymore, but everyone keeps calling him little Marc, which creates a kind of environment about how he shows up, or how people then treat him, because you're still calling him little Marc. So I had a problem with that. So I'm going to call him Marc Jr. So Ashley and Marc Jr. have the same mother. So the eldest sister, who's older than the twins, and Marc Jr. have the same mother. So now Marc is telling his story. I just wanted to bring everything into the picture. Marc is telling his story about how when he was up until 5-6 years old, he lived with his mother and his sister, who was, the mother was struggling with addiction issues. And then after 5-6, moved out to live with Dorothy and his dad. So grandmother and dad, moved to live with grandmother and dad. But when this is how it's so important, how you kind of introduce your children to whomever you're going to marry, if it's not their original parent, or whomever you're going to be in relationship with. If that's not their original parent, it's very important, because Marc recounts how he was everything was fine living with Dorothy and Marc Snr until Jamilla came into the picture, Marc Snr's wife, and talks about how he came from school and was asked by Marc Snr if he spoke to Jamilla when he came into the house. And obviously this is a young child having issues with someone else coming into the picture. He's just really enjoying just being with his grandmother and his father, having come from an abandonment relationship with his mother, who would leave them for 2 weeks on end without food because she had addiction issues. So he's just now finding his comfort and finding his place and finding restoration and love. And now this woman whom his father's about to marry is coming into the picture. So he recounts the story about how things changed when Jamilla came, because one day he came home and the Marc Snr asked, did you greet Jamilla coming into the house? And he said no, and Marc basically assaulted him, literally basically assaulted him, and told him that when he comes to the house, he better speak to Jamilla. And all of this discord with his dad started after he married Jamilla. What I have to say here is how important it is to introduce and factor in and gradually slide in whoever it is that you bring into the picture, so that it's not jarring and not scary for the young child, and the child still feels a sense of security, that there'll still be the eye of their parents' eye, and that this person that is being brought in is also somebody who's kind to them, that they feel safe around, instead of just saying, oh, this is so and so, you better greet her when you walk into the house. How dare you not greet her when you walk into the house? I think it's important. What came from that for me is the importance of how you bring somebody in, and how you need to therefore be able to enroll your child. make your child feel safe in their position, even though your child is not about, your life is not about your child and how they feel every time, but that there's an enrollment period that needs to happen, and an introduction period that needs to happen where people are properly and clearly introduced as who they are, and then there's an enrollment so that there is no animosity, there is no sense of I'm trying to marry this person and bring this person into the house, and this child is being disrespectful, but how did you introduce this person? How did you enroll, getting to know, the getting to knowing of this person? So Marc Jr. talks about his anger and not being able to speak, his anger, the root of his anger being as a result of not being able to speak up for himself to Marc Sr., his dad, and that being obviously a point of frustration for him, feeling as if, he's like this grown man and then he's afraid of his dad, and that's part of his anger. The other thing that he says is that this coming in of this woman obviously made him feel like he was abandoned, same abandonment pattern comes up as well. But also what comes up regarding this abandonment thing is, or this abandonment pattern, is that Jadyn, the youngest two siblings, the young boy and young girl, Jadyn and Jadyn, feel as though Marc just left. Because at 18, Marc left because there was so much contention between him and his father that it became dangerous for him. He was at a point where he was now being just physically abused, being assaulted by his dad. So he moved away for his own safety, for his own peace, and for his own growth and being able to go on with his life. It was for him, for his wellness. But Jadyn and Jadyn only just experienced this 18-year-old godlike brother leaving as, oh my gosh, he just left us. Not understanding the dynamics of, he was being assaulted, he was being abused, and he needed to get to a safe place. He needed to get to a sane place where he's away from that kind of environment and continue with his life. So there's this explanation where he explains that, he left for his health, and he also wanted to leave all connection to his father. But he tries to explain to his siblings that in trying to leave all connection to his father, he wasn't leaving them, but he was trying to leave everything that had to do with his father, but not necessarily abandoning his siblings. And Marc is trying to explain to Jadyn and Jadyn this is what he was living about, but they're young and they literally pounce on him. Literally pounce on him, and they don't get that, oh, this man was leaving that kind of abusive environment for his health, for his safety. He wasn't leaving the environment because he was just abandoning them. Him leaving wasn't an abandonment move, it was a safety move, it was a health move. And I'm not sure why they feel like, oh my gosh, you left us, you were our older brother and you left us. But I'm like, he's just your older brother, he's not your parent. So he doesn't have to stay in the house forever with you to make you feel some kind of security that you have this older brother. If it's okay for him to move out at 18 and he's ready to move out at 18, then he should have been able to move out at 18, despite, even if there wasn't abuse, So I think they're young and they don't get this whole, at a certain age you leave home, and it's not about abandonment, it's about you leaving because you're going to work, or you're leaving because you are getting to a safe place for yourself away from abuse that you're experiencing in the environment. So I don't understand why the siblings really reacted in such a combustive way to Marc's leaving. And and it really just goes off the rails and off the chains. And Iyanla says, these young kids have been taught by Marc Sr. to be inconsiderate. He didn't teach them how to be considerate. And Ashley is also trying to explain to these young ones, hey, he was trying to get to a safe place. He wasn't leaving y'all. He was leaving the environment. He was leaving the danger that he always felt like he was in. But they weren't even hearing her. And Iyanla says it's because somebody taught you how to be inconsiderate. Somebody told you how to not extend compassion to your older brother. And that's your father who did that. In this entire interaction with Marc Jr., with his siblings, with Ashley and Jadyn and Jadyn, like to Jadyn and Jadyn, it didn't even occur that, oh, you felt under threat. The environment was heated and you needed to get out so that something more and something greater and something more tragic and more dangerous didn't happen. So you left the room, you know, to be safe. Then Marc Snr kind of sits down with Marc Jr. and really just talks about his story and explains his story to Marc Jr. about how he had to be the man of the house, and where that kind of scary authoritarian kind of attitude comes from, and that overbearing attitude and that codependent thing comes from. It comes from having to provide for his mom and creating that codependent relationship to be able to survive with a single mom, and the things that he had to do in order to make sure that they were okay at home and had food to eat and could afford whatever money needed to afford in terms of bills, food, or whatever, and how that affected him and the things around him that affected him and created brokenness in him as well as trauma. And, you know, you can see there's a sense of like peace between the interaction. You know, Marc Snr is not showing up as an authoritarian and speaking over Marc Jr., but there's just a man-to-man conversation, and there's a lot of compassion and love coming from Marc Snr, and just listening and being able to hear where Marc Jr. is coming from in terms of how he was affected, and also explaining his story and yet still apologizing and expressing his love. And I thought, you know, this is a interesting change from the last time where Marc Snr came across as really scary. And I think those facilitation is everything. You know, it's possible to have these conversations, but facilitation is needed. A middleman is needed. You know, a therapist is needed to be able to say, okay, like I said last week, there needs to be a framework that gets created by the therapist. So everybody is brought out of their own frameworks of how things should be done or how the conversation should be had. And so the therapist creating the framework and then saying, here are the rules for this framework, and here's how we're going to talk to each other. Here's how you're going to tell your story. Here's how you're going to listen, and vice versa. And here's how you're then going to create a way forward that is that breaks the pattern, but that also creates compassion for each other, to each other, about how each was affected by the things that you went through.